The objectives of the Creators Organization's research project were to try and understand more about some of the actors that participate in the shaping of copyright law and policy. Copyright law should recognize and attempt to balance the interests of a range of stakeholders, from authors and performers to publishers, producers, and consumers. To do so, policymakers primarily involve organizations that represent individual authors and performers and other stakeholders in the policy process. And yet, it's surprising how little we know about just how these organizations operate and contribute to the policy process. For the Creators Organizations research project, I conducted an empirical study of 4 organizations, a trade union and a collective management organization from both the music and the publishing industry. To analyze and compare how these organizations engage with policy matters, I selected 3 contemporary copyright issues: the fairness of the contractual arrangements of authors and performers, the UK private copying exception, and the implementation of the EU Collective Rights Management Directive. I worked with 2 main sources of data: primary data, which I generated through semi-structured interviews with representatives of the organizations, and I complemented these data with document analysis. One of the most striking findings of this research was just how different these organizations are, despite the fact that they actually represent broadly the same copyright stakeholder category, that of authors and performers, of rights owners. Differences exist not only in relation to the priorities and positions of these organizations, but also in the extent of their policy proactivity. It appeared that some organizations were more concerned with trying to shape the copyright policy agenda as such, whereas others were more focused on influencing the outcomes of this agenda. I identified a range of common factors that contribute to these differences among individual organizations. These include organizational mandate, membership composition, as well as resources. Another finding of this research is that there are in fact complex power dynamics and imbalances between individual organizations. For instance, between trade unions and collective management organizations, the latter are better placed to exercise influence over the direction and substance of copyright policy. They gain power not only through the pivotal role that they play for the copyright system, but also through the value of the rights that they administer, as well as the large memberships that they represent and hold. Considering the existence of such power imbalances, as well as the fact that these organizations operate within a densely populated landscape of copyright stakeholders, individual actors form coalitions and networks as a strategy to further their own particular policy cause. Some established networks are, for instance, UK Music and the British Copyright Council. However, the positions that these organizations advance and the issues that they lobby on in terms of priority are not representative for all the participating actors. Yet, my research shows evidence that policymakers do not fully grasp all these granular individual differences between organizations, as well as the complexity of the power dynamics at play. What this means for copyright law is that policymakers likely get uneven exposure to different policy matters. Those issues that are advanced by more vocal, more powerful, more proactive, or larger groups of organizations are more likely to gain and sustain the attention of policymakers and make it onto their agendas for action. Similarly, this means that certain issues may never surface onto policy discussions and could thus not be addressed through copyright law. I have been able to develop recommendations for how the issues identified in this research can be absorbed and acted upon by researchers, policymakers, as well as by the industry organizations themselves. Because of the proximity of these industry actors to the lawmaking process, and because they exist to voice the interests and needs of those individuals that are affected by copyright law, it is essential that we continue to broaden our understanding of the identities and workings of these and other organizations.